You wake up every morning and wonder if this is all there is to your existence. You go through the motions, check the boxes, earn the paycheck, and feel nothing inside. But somewhere deep inside, a voice whispers that you were meant for something else entirely. This is the story of a man who silenced that voice for 15 long years, and what happened the day he finally listened and allowed himself to feel again. His name was David, and he was just like you and me. He grew up in a small farming town where the fields stretched endlessly under open skies. As a boy, he spent every afternoon in his father's workshop, carving wood with his hands. He made chairs, tables, small toys for the neighbors' children who played in the dusty streets. The smell of fresh pine and the rhythm of the chisel brought him a peace he couldn't explain. His father would watch him work and say nothing, just nod with quiet approval and pride. David dreamed of becoming a craftsman, of building furniture that would last for many generations. But when he turned 18, his mother sat him down at the kitchen table one evening. She told him the workshop barely made enough to survive and keep food on the table. She said he needed a real job, something stable, something that paid well every month. David looked at his father with pleading eyes, hoping he would speak up and defend him, but his father only looked away, worn down by years of struggling to make ends meet. So David took a job at the grain mill on the edge of town without protest. The work was steady, the pay was decent, and everyone told him he was doing the right thing. He told himself it was temporary, just until he saved enough to open his own woodworking shop. But months turned into years, and the workshop tools gathered dust in the corner of his small room. He met a woman named Elena at the town market one quiet Sunday morning in spring. She had kind eyes and a laugh that made him forget the heavy weight he carried daily. They married within a year, and David promised her a good life filled with comfort and security. He worked longer hours at the mill, took on extra shifts, brought home more money each week. Elena never asked him to do this, but he felt it was his duty as a husband. The weakness in David was not greed or ambition or desire for material wealth and status. It was fear disguised as responsibility. Hiding behind the mask of being a good provider, he was afraid that choosing his passion would mean failing the people he loved most in life. So he buried his dreams deeper with every passing year until they seemed almost forgotten completely. He stopped visiting his father's old workshop altogether, avoiding it like a painful wound that wouldn't heal. When Elena asked him about his woodworking, he would change the subject or say he was too tired. The light in his eyes faded slowly, like a candle burning down in a quiet room at night. He became irritable at home, distant during meals, silent during long evenings that stretched on endlessly. Elena felt it deep in her heart, but didn't know how to reach him anymore. 15 years passed this way, each day bleeding into the next without meaning or purpose or joy. Then one cold morning, David received word that his father had passed away peacefully in his sleep. He stood alone in the empty workshop, surrounded by tools his father had used faithfully for 50 years. The air smelled of old wood and memories he had abandoned like broken promises to himself. On the workbench sat an unfinished rocking chair, the last piece his father had been making with love. David ran his hand along the smooth armrest and felt something crack open inside his weary chest. He realized he had spent 15 years running from the one thing that made him feel truly alive, And now the man who taught him that sacred craft was gone forever from this world. He sat on the floor of the workshop and wept like a child lost in darkness, not for his father's death alone, but for the life he had wasted running from his true self. When he returned home that evening, Elena saw the brokenness written clearly across his weathered face. She held him without words, and for the first time in years, he let himself be held completely. The next day, David wandered to the edge of town where an old carpenter named William lived alone. William was in his 70s, still building cabinets and chairs in a small shed behind his modest house. David had known him since childhood, but had avoided him for years out of deep shame and regret. William looked up from his work and simply nodded, as if he had been expecting him all along. David asked if he could learn from him, if it was too late to start his life again. William wiped the sawdust from his weathered hands and said something David would never forget in his lifetime. He said that a tree doesn't apologize for the years it stood still during the harsh winter. It simply grows again when spring comes, stronger for having waited patiently through the bitter cold months. William offered to teach him 3 evenings a week after his long shift at the mill ended. The system was simple and clear. Show up on time, listen carefully, work with your hands, and do not rush. At first, David's hands were clumsy, his cuts uneven, his patience thin as paper and easily torn. He would make mistakes and feel the old frustration rising in his throat like bile that burned. But William never scolded him harshly, only corrected him gently and showed him the proper way again and again. Weeks passed slowly, and David began to remember the rhythm of the tools and the dance of creation. He started waking up earlier each morning, not with dread, but with anticipation for the evening lessons that awaited. Elena noticed the change in him, the way his shoulders sat lighter, the way he smiled at breakfast again. One evening, William told David it was time to build something of his own choosing with his own hands. A chair for Elena, made entirely by his hands, to be finished in exactly 2 weeks from that day. David felt the weight of the task pressing down heavily, but also something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. He worked every evening after the mill, measuring, cutting, sanding, shaping each piece with growing confidence and care. There were moments of doubt, nights when he wanted to quit, mistakes that made him question everything about himself. But William's words stayed with him like an anchor holding him steady. Do not rush, just show up and work. The final test came on a Sunday morning when he planned to give Elena the finished chair he'd made. But that morning, the mill called urgently, asking him to cover an emergency shift for double pay immediately. David stood at the crossroads he had stood at 15 years ago, facing the same difficult choice once more: money or meaning, safety or soul, the familiar path or the uncertain one that led to his true self. This time, he made a different choice, one that honored the man he wanted to become at last. He told him he couldn't come, that he had something more important to finish for someone he deeply loved. He spent the entire day in William's shed, applying the final layers of oil and polish with careful, deliberate strokes. His hands moved with a calmness he had forgotten existed in this world of constant noise and rushing. When the chair was done, he carried it home carefully as the sun dipped low behind the distant golden fields. Elena was sitting on the porch, reading in the fading golden light of evening, unaware of what awaited her. He placed the chair beside her without a word, his heart beating hard against his ribs with nervous anticipation. She looked at it, then at him with wide eyes, and tears filled her eyes like rain. She sat in the chair, rocking gently, and reached for his calloused hand with her soft fingers intertwined. She told him this was the man she had married, the one she had been waiting patiently to see again. That evening, William came by and saw the chair sitting proudly on the porch in the fading light. He smiled and told David he was ready to take on his own projects now with confidence and skill. A week later, a neighbor asked David to build a table for his family to gather around each evening. Then another asked for a set of chairs for their dining room to replace the old broken ones. Word spread quietly through the town like seeds carried on the wind, reaching every home and heart slowly. Within months, David had enough work to leave the mill and open a small shop of his very own. It wasn't about the money anymore, though the money came steadily and honestly through his dedicated work and craft. It was about the peace he felt deep in his soul when he worked with his hands every single day. The way time moved differently when he was creating something that mattered deeply to him and to others around him. Elena would visit him in the shop, bringing him tea, sitting quietly while he worked in peaceful silence together. The distance between them dissolved like morning fog under the warmth of the sun, leaving only love and understanding. David learned that regret is not about the years you lost or the time you can never get back. It's about the moment you choose to stop losing them and start living the life you were meant to live. Every day is a door, and you decide whether to walk through it bravely or turn away in fear. Passion is not a luxury. It's the language your soul speaks when everything else is silent and still. Money can feed your body, but only meaning can feed your life and make you feel truly alive inside. The question is not whether it's too late to begin the journey back to your authentic self. The question is whether you're brave enough to begin right now, in this very moment, without hesitation or delay. Take one small step today toward the thing you've been avoiding for far too long in your life.